It happened when I was very young. Something I didn't discover through hypnosis that happened to my mother and I as we were driving to my ballet class. And we saw a UFO out our window, and it came down lower and lower until it was right above a telephone pole. And our car stalled, and there were about 12 other cars stalled around us. And white beams of light were shooting out from the craft, and one hit me in the face, and I was paralyzed. It came through the roof of the car. It didn't come through the window. And I remember another person next to us had a white beam of light in his face. My mother asked him if he thought it was a UFO, and he said he thought it was. And I saw a tall, thin man, I thought, walking in between our cars, and when he reached our car, my mother went to sleep. And then 3 small beings came and took me out of the car and floated me into the craft.
Okay, 3 small beings and what did they look like?
They had large heads and big black eyes, and it was very fuzzy. I was almost passed out at that time.
And they floated you up onto the spacecraft, and then what happened?
They put me onto a table, and they showed me a long needle, and they put the edge of the needle into my navel. And then they floated me back down to my car and shut the door on my back, and my mother woke up, and we continued on to my ballet class. And when we got there, my class was nearly over. I had missed an hour of it. And my mother called the FAA to report the craft, and other people had called also, and including a lieutenant colonel from the Air Force.
All right, now, you had another incident happen to you?
Well, 3 months later, they came back, and they took me from my room. Actually, I walked out into the front yard. My parents were standing out in the front yard also, and took me aboard the craft and removed something that looked like a placenta attached to an umbilical cord.
From your body?
Yes.
Now, what are you saying happened to you?
Well, I can only speculate that they must have put something in me to, I think they
You feel you were artificially inseminated? You feel you were impregnated by them?
Yes.
And they were harvesting...
As crazy as it sounds.
Well, a lot of things sound crazy. A lot of things are inexplicable. Doesn't mean they don't happen. But you're saying you feel that you were somehow impregnated and they were taking the child?
Yes. Well, as 3 months into the pregnancy.
All right, now, do you tell people this story? Do you share this story with people?
I do share the story with people. I think it's a very important thing to share. Also, I know that it happens to so many people, and if I had thought that I was alone in this, it would have been very difficult. And I am still searching to this day for other people who were there in the intersection with me, and possibly the lieutenant colonel who saw what I saw.
Okay, but are you generally greeted with skepticism from people? Do people...
Yes, but it's surprising how many people do believe this, because...
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I talked to the audience during the break, and how many of you in the audience believe these stories? A lot of you do.
And yeah. I'm not trying to convince anyone that it's
No,
true.
we understand. No, but you have to understand also that according to a Roper poll, I think nearly 4 million Americans say that they've had a similar experience to you folks. So, I mean, you're not talking about a small number of people. How has this changed your life? I would assume that it has.
Well, I think about it every night when I go to sleep, because recently I became engaged and I live with my fiancé, and now they're visiting us together, and he woke with an incision scar in his back about 2 inches long. So I know it's still happening, and it concerns me about having my own children, but through help of friends and people I know, I'm getting through it.
Yeah, I didn't ask you about the physical evidence that you claim to have sustained from one of these abductions. What did they do to you?
Well, the first abduction I remembered without regression hypnosis. Also, I was taken aboard a craft, and they showed me a small BB, and they told me they were going to put it in my nose because they had 2 tubes going from my nose to my feet, and that it would not hurt. But they took an instrument and put the BB on the end of it and punctured the soft palate of my mouth. And it hurt very badly, and blood spurted onto my gown that they had given me, and I still have those puncture wounds in my mouth.
Which have never been explained by a doctor?
He asked me what I put up there, because it has scar tissue around it, so it was obviously done after birth.
Okay.
I think people think that you are put under hypnosis and you're very relaxed, and you ask these questions, what happened? You say, oh, I was taken aboard a spacecraft and this happened. But I know, Michael and I both work with Bud Hopkins, it's not like that at all. When you get to that moment that you maybe have some missing time, a block of missing time, getting through that is the most traumatic thing. I almost threw up all over Mr.
No, I'm not suggesting it wasn't true, this young woman.
When I was 6 years old, I hadn't seen anything about this, and the last thing I wanted to really believe was that this happened. Actually, the last thing I would want to believe is that I'm crazy, so I guess it's better that it happened.
I was living in Colorado on a little hill outside the city a ways, sort of separated from the city. I was stirring a pot of beans in my kitchen one night, about 10:30 or 11, and all of a sudden I felt compelled to go look out the window. So I walked over there along with my big shepherd collie bodyguard dog, and we looked out the window, and out at the edge of the lawn was, under the street light were these four, which I at first glance thought were kids. And I thought, that's strange, because it's late, and it was kind of not the kind of neighborhood where the kids were out running around. As we stood there, I began to realize that something was off. The movements of these kids were kind of insect-like. They were kind of not fluid like we have. They were just different. Then I saw that they had round heads, bald heads, and long spindly arms and torsos. And I just got this really scary feeling. I wasn't looking at kids. My dog, who was very aggressive about her job, dropped her head and tail, whined, and went under the bed and stayed there. Okay, and she had never done that before, ever. You know.
Really?
So I knew.
Now, what did you think at the time? Did you just kind of?
Well, I looked at that and I beat it back to the beans. And I'm standing stirring my beans, and so I thought, well, I better go back and check it, because if I'll wake up the next morning and be nuts trying to figure out what it was. So I ran back and looked for about 5 seconds. They were still there. It scared me so badly, I just ran back to the beans and
But you did nothing? You didn't report it? You didn't tell anybody?
My husband came home later and he said, gee, honey, you look like you saw a ghost. And I said, didn't say anything.
Really? Something else happened to you again in 1989?
89, I was living in Sedona, taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon. I woke up and I was paralyzed, and I was awake, but I couldn't move, and I became aware of a little being standing by my bed right there.
Rayna.
And I wasn't drinking, I promise, Vicki. And I noticed he was right even with the doorknob, so he was no taller than top of his head came to the doorknob. I love this look. And
I don't want to see one of these guys.
well, he really basically ignored me. He had kind of a mushroom-colored big head, and he was a little skinny body, and he was wearing, I know this sounds crazy, it all does, but he was wearing this little tight-fitting jumpsuit, dark jumpsuit. I heard this little sound from him. I assumed communication. He was ignoring me. I was mad. I'm screaming telepathically. I can't scream, but I'm mentally screaming, go away, leave me alone. And he's totally ignoring me. Made me mad. And he did this little communication. He was gone. When he was gone, the paralysis was gone.
My question is for Rayna. She says that when she was in Colorado, she saw UFO people out there. Is that true? Mm-hmm. And then when you were in Sedona, you saw them. Were they similar? Did they look alike to you?
No, actually, they were different.
They all looked different?
They were different. They were different in color and
Did they look like
structure.
these guys?
Well, the little guy, and he looked
Would you say that they were the same height? They were one was
No,
short?
the ones in Colorado were a little taller than the ones in
Did you recognize them? Do you feel that they're following you in some way?
I think yes, I do. Sounds nuts,
You do?
but I
You
do.
think they're
Yes.
following you?
Yeah.
Marina, you said that you didn't even really believe much of this stuff until your daughter had an encounter? I mean, Rayna, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said Marina, I meant Rayna. Your daughter?
I just was doing the denial thing. I was just ignoring the things that were happening. Then my young daughter came to me and told me something that she couldn't have made up, because I wasn't talking about it at that point. And I found out later that it was just almost boilerplate to what I've heard from other people. And at that point I said, I got to be mommy and go and find out, because my heart froze when she told me that I'm mommy, I'm in control.
How old was she when she said something happened to her?
2.
2?
She's 4 now. She was 2.
No kidding. So did you take her to a doctor? Or?
No, I went to the doctor. I said, am I nuts? Is she right? Or, what's happening? and I was...
Is this something that runs in your family?
Yes, I believe it does.
Stop it.
No,
it runs in your family?
my brother, I was talked to my brother, and as we talked, he was remembering things when we were kids in the house, and he's certainly not new age to make up this kind of stuff.
Is that something is that unusual? Does it run in families like that? Supposedly?
Yes, it does. Again, we don't know in what reality this happens, and there is a consensus that gets formed, and apparently people open up to this kind of experience.
I saw a UFO, that's all. I looked across the field, and I saw something glinting, and it was a large silver object.
This is Christina Florence. She says she would like to believe her UFO experience was just a fantasy.
I'd love it if it was a fantasy. It would be much easier to deal with. If I could say, yes, I'm crazy. This is all not real.
She came to Hopkins reluctantly to explore something she's not ready to accept. Her memory of seeing a UFO, a large silver object, as a child, twice.
Those are my conscious recollections, and that's all I can say really happened. However, under hypnosis, surprisingly enough, other things came out which indicate that maybe some sort of person or people from another world came and took my sister and I and sort of looked us over and did a few experiments. It's sort of like a dummy birth. It's like fake, but the baby's real and they're real and I'm real. But
you are listening to an audio tape of one of Chris's hypnosis sessions with Bud Hopkins. Under his probing, she and other women told of being shown babies by aliens. The implication? That the babies were theirs, the result of reproductive experiments conducted by the space creatures, something Chris doesn't want to believe.
If Bud wants to conclude that, if people reading Bud's book feel that that's conclusive, then that's one thing. But I, myself, do not want to believe that any of this has any connection.
We were walking along the banks, picking wildflowers. We saw this object come over our heads. It was this oval object, pinky orange, which landed down over a hill vertically. We ran up to see what it was. Our first thought was it was an aircraft on fire. We live quite near Manchester Airport.
It was big?
Oh, it was very big. It was 60 foot across. 60 foot across when we saw this object hovering 2 foot off the ground. We just stared at it. We were transfixed, the three of us. We were just watching this object, and it just seemed to hover, and there was complete silence, no noise at all.
And when you ran towards it, what was happening on the ground?
Well, nothing as
I thought, didn't the grass move or something?
That's when we were running back.
When you were running back?
Yes.
What happened?
Yes. When we were running away from the object, the grass seemed to move at the side of us and at the front of us, sort of blowing about.
What, to cut a sort of path for you, as it were?
No, the grass was overgrown on the riverbank, but it seemed to be blowing over.
And when you got home, what happened? What did you...
Well, when we got home, we saw my husband, who then was on a shift, a 2:10 shift, and I said, what are you doing home? Because we'd gone out of the house at 7:30 in the evening, and obviously he was home. It was dark. We didn't realise until 18 months later that there was an hour missing out of our time.
Oh, so you had a similar experience to Dorothy here?
Yes.
Yeah, lost time.
Yes.
And there was some effect on your skin, wasn't there?
Yes, my eyes were burnt and scaly underneath my eyes.
Now, you can't account for that?
No, I can't account for that at all.
It wasn't, well, it was evening, wasn't it? It wasn't sunny. I mean,
it was dusk. It was
dusk,
9 o'clock on an August evening.
So it certainly imagined you wouldn't have got a suntan, would you?
No, I don't think so.
I
hadn't been out that day.
Now, sometime later, 18 months later, just to move this on a bit, you were persuaded to go and see a hypnotist. And yes. You and your daughter, I gather, both gave that hypnotist an almost identical version of yes. what had happened previously.
That's correct.
And when you recounted it to the hypnotist, under hypnosis,
yes.
What did you tell him?
Under hypnosis, I don't remember anything at all about the hypnosis, only what I have seen on videotape.
Sure.
I must stress this.
You've seen yourself back.
That's correct. And my only conscious memory of this object was seeing the object, it seemed to disappear and appear, and we ran away from it.
Right.
We saw it actually following on the tail of a plane going into Manchester Airport as we were nearing our home. But I don't remember anything about the hypnosis, only what I have seen on videotape. And I find it very hard to accept what I actually said.
Which was?
Under hypnosis. Well, what was said was, I ran down the hill, the three of us ran down the hill. We thought we were running home. We went into this man in dark clothing, tall, dark eyes. Then there was a sensation of floating and then being on a table and having feelings of ice put on our legs and lights shone in our eyes, and that's all I remember. And there were 6 of them and they all looked the same. Now, I just can't accept this, but this is what's on the
That's what you said under hypnosis, right?
That's correct.
Now, I have to say, well, I imagine anyway, that when you recount this story of what happened to you under hypnosis to your chums in Manchester, you don't get an entirely sympathetic hearing.
I don't talk to them a lot about that.
On a November evening about 10 years ago, Lynda Jones took a young son and daughter for a walk along a Manchester canal bank. Suddenly, they saw a bright light in the sky.
It looked like it was going to hit us directly. We ducked into the grass. It landed vertically in a field over a hill. We ran up the hill. We thought we were going to see an aircraft in flames or something, but it was just this object, total silence. Not making any noise at all. It was then shaped like a half moon, really. Girder structure, the undercarriage of it. We stood there watching this object, transfixed. And we stared at it. It was hovering 2 foot off the ground.
It turned out that Lynda lost track of about half an hour of time during the encounter. At first, she told no one. Years later, under hypnosis, she recalls an experience on board the craft, but she doesn't like to recall it now.
I don't think I should remember. I think whoever blanked my mind out, or if it was fear that blanked my mind out, I do not know. But I know that I should not remember.
My husband and I were driving up to my girlfriend's place in Monbulk, which is in the Dandenong Mountains. We were driving on Belgrave-Hallam Road, and it was just on dusk. I saw what I thought was round orange lights in the field. It looked unusual to me.
Later that night, retracing their route home, Kelly noticed something else unusual.
It's about a kilometre or so in front of us, about twice the height of the treetops. We could see this object, which at first I thought was a blimp. It had the shape of a blimp, but it was light. As we got closer to it, the light seemed to sort of separate, and it was actually these a row of round lights, and they were orange. It appeared like there was silhouettes standing in these round orange circles, like people, but you could only see the black outline. Well, I just said to my husband, look, there's people in there. And the minute I said that, it shot off to the left of us. Within 1 or 2 seconds, it was gone completely. About a kilometre or two further down the road, as we kept driving, I came across what, at least what I thought, was a screen or a wall of light across the road. And my heart started racing and the adrenaline was sort of pumping through my body, and I'm thinking, we've just seen us back down there, we're in for, you know, a close encounter. Then the next instant, nothing. We seem to have actually covered a fair distance that I don't even remember covering. It might have been possibly close to a kilometre that I don't remember actually travelling. There was no light. There was nothing blocking the road.
Kelly says it wasn't until weeks later she remembered actually getting out of the car that night.
And I saw that there was another car that had pulled up 100 metres down the road. Then I walked around the front of the car to where my husband was standing on the other side, and we started walking across the road together. As we were walking across the road, I looked down and I saw that the other people were getting out the car and starting to walk as well. So I was quite happy that there was other people there who were seeing the same thing that we were. And we walked up along here to where the fence is. Right out in front of us is this huge craft. I was totally awestruck. You know, it was science fiction coming to life. There wasn't any fear then. It was just all total awe. We stood here I guess, side by side, my husband and I, for about 30 to 45 seconds. Then this tall, dark being just appeared in front of the craft, and he was followed by about another 7 or 8 that appeared straight behind him. I felt this energy go through me. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before in my life. It was like some sort of low-level frequency that came in waves, but it was so dense that I could actually physically feel it going through my body. And that feeling absolutely terrified me. It was like, I can't even explain the horror that I felt just feeling this. And I began screaming. The minute I did, the eyes on these things lit up and they came charging across the field. Halfway across, they split up into 2 groups. Some headed off down there, and the rest came directly towards us. I felt this blow to my stomach, and the next thing you know, I'm back here somewhere on the grass. It literally lifted me off of my feet. And I thought I was going to die. I thought if I don't get up now, I'm going to pass out and I'm going to die. I'm not going to come back to consciousness, you know. So I pulled myself up into a sitting position, and when I sat up, I couldn't see anything, and it was like there was just black in front of my eyes. I want you to try stretching it down a little bit as well.
Kelly is not the only one who saw these images that night. For the first time ever, independent witnesses have given the same account of a close encounter. Even though Kelly has never met Jane, Glenda and Bill from the other car she saw, she has seen the sketches they drew for UFO researchers.
They've drawn the same circles of light around the top of the craft with these blue lines coming down, ending in a semicircle on the ground. They've actually also drawn a tripod underneath, which was something I didn't see that night. It becomes very clear then that we were all looking at the same thing and that it wasn't your average saucer-shaped craft. And basically, the second party were able to draw sketches of the beings very similar to the ones that I had, and they're not your usual little grey things that are, you know, media propaganda. I found a small red-coloured equilateral triangle underneath my navel, which I guess in reality provoked only a minor curiosity at the time. It was oddly geometric, and I did wonder, you know, how something like that could get on me that looked like a burn without me feeling it.
At UFO conferences, where Kelly is now a keynote speaker, she adds strength to her own story by showing photographs of physical marks left on one of the other women.
We were all left with triangular marks under our navels, but the ones that were marks that were actually photographed, the first one came from Glenda, which is it's a series of 3 small red dots along the inner thigh, and both Jane and Glenda were marked with these dots. I wasn't. Glenda had a ligature mark around her ankle, which is quite severe bruising. It looked like she'd been strapped down to something.
UFO researchers have also reported finding physical traces at the site where all witnesses said the encounter happened, particularly in relation to where the craft landed.
Inside that semicircle was actually a triangular formation of 3 points spaced 6 metres apart, which correspond with the tripod that was drawn underneath the girl's craft.
To this day, Kelly still doesn't know exactly what happened to her that night.
Tried a little bit.
Her most vivid memory is the fear that she felt.
That's very good. It's finally come out to what I'm looking for. And I think a lot of people, you know, might have experienced the fear in a nightmare when you're being chased or something like that, and it's a terror that you feel that, you know, sometimes can wake you up or whatever, but it's absolutely horrifying when you're dreaming it. And that's exactly what I was feeling while I was totally awake. That sort of terror, actually having to feel it while you're conscious and physically awake and feel it as a reality, is like a living nightmare, like a nightmare had come to life.
I don't remember being taken, just like I don't remember being dropped off, but I was asleep when it happened.
She may have been dreaming, but Amy Rylance says she didn't imagine it when a spaceship landed in her front yard and took her away.
Do you believe in aliens or UFOs? I do now. I definitely do now.
I believe in it now because I've seen it and I know what I saw.
Amy's friend Petra was also in the house that night and claims she was woken by a bright light.
I've seen Amy in front of me on a beam of light being carried out of the living room window into a really huge ship outside.
The only evidence this happened, a torn curtain and a burnt bush, apparently singed by the bright light which carried sleeping Amy out the window.
No, I don't drink. I don't take drugs at all. I'm just a normal person.
So what was your reaction when you saw this? What did you do? Did you reach out to help her?
No, I couldn't. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it, and I fainted.
Next to wake up was Amy's husband, Keith.
I freaked out completely. I went mental, running around, screaming for her. But after I believed Petra, which I did after about 5 minutes, I called the police.
The only physical evidence I have are the marks from the tests that they did on me.
What sort of tests?
Just getting kind of DNA samples, and they didn't do anything bad to me, so it was wholly a good experience from my point of view.
Amy and Keith say no one can explain how she was taken from Maryborough in southern Queensland and ended up in Mackay in North Queensland, a distance of 800 kilometres, in 3 hours in the middle of the night.
So it doesn't matter if we were all on hallucinogenic drugs and drinking, that still wouldn't put Amy 800 kilometres away. They're never going to acknowledge the existence of aliens.
A bit further down the hill that I noticed on the right-hand side of me, some long, oblong-shaped lights. I didn't know what they were. I mean, I only sort of caught a glimpse of a bright orange light sort of shining through. As I got down the hillside and started to come around the corner by this little hotel that takes us back through the back roads towards the freeway, one of the girls in the back noticed a very bright white light with a type of blue haze around it. One of the girls was sort of saying, oh, maybe, you know, like it's a UFO, and, you know, was sort of like, just laughed it off and said, don't be so ridiculous. I heard Victoria and one of the other girls in the back there, they were commenting on something that was behind us. They actually thought somebody was coming up behind us, like a truck or something, because it was moving fairly fast and very bright. It was just such a bright as blinding light. It was orange like a sunset, and it was just spanning across the road. I got really scared. I said to Grace, quick, just step on it. Because I knew there was a town just a kilometre up the road. As we got closer into the middle of this car parking area and looked up, we could see this ship. Well, that's what you'd have to call it, because it was, you know, definitely not an aeroplane, and it was something from definitely not this world, that's for sure. It sort of moved across from this direction straight over the top of us. Sort of disappeared into a gully where we lost sight of it. We were scared for our safety. I mean, I've got to be honest, I think it's the first time in my life that I could identify of anybody telling me that they were scared they were going to die. Because I was. When I got to the opening of the drive here, the other girls noticed that there was something else up, some activity up there in the sky. We were still scared. We didn't know what they were either. They seemed to be moving in a direction that this other craft had gone over and gone down. So the first thing you think of, just pull up someone's driveway. And as I pulled in, the light was so blinding, it actually was hurting our eyes to look at it. Then I noticed a figure coming. It wasn't a human, it definitely was no human, that's for sure. I felt threatened by it. I felt really, really threatened by it. That was the closest thing I've ever experienced, the thought of actually, you know, coming close to death, I suppose, which sounds pretty silly, but the fear I had was like that, like I wasn't going to see my family again. And the weird thing is that it's not the normal thing to talk about and for people to accept. But, you know, it's been 3 years now, and
And I still feel very distressed by it.
In the weeks, I felt a lot of doubt with what happened to Grace. I didn't believe it, truly believed it, because I hadn't experienced anything like that myself. So I didn't show it either. I mean, I didn't show that I didn't believe it, because I think it was important that I looked like I was supporting her, so that otherwise, she might go sort of, off the rails if she didn't feel that she had some support from her husband.
But 2 weeks later, those doubts disappeared.
What's work?
Late one night, they were both woken by their distressed 15-year-old son.
He was dead set that he had presence in his room. There was somebody in his room. And one thing that he did kept saying at that time was that, can you hear that sound? And he kept pointing up to the ceiling. And we could hear this low drone sound. I knew then I'd heard that sound before. We got back into bed and I was laying there. And I thought, do I lie here and just let this thing go through and just, try and wipe it off as another bad experience, or do I actually get up and look, and if it is what I think it is, then maybe my husband will be able to see for the first time and he will believe.
I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. When you see an object that's just sort of floating through the air, at slow pace, and you think to yourself, oh my God, it struck me as, being awesome. It's just something unbelievable.
It was a relief that he was able to see this thing, and all I kept saying was that was the thing that was there the night when I was with the others.
Certainly by its nature, by the characteristics of the way it just hovered across the house at a slow pace, nothing man-made. Not from this country, not from this earth, I should say. You either accept it or you don't accept it, and I tend to say now, after I've seen it with my own eyes, I accept it, but I don't, harp on about it and talk about it, and if it's just one of those things you try and leave as a part of your life that's happened, and let's get on with things, let's move on from here, you see. And that's how I sort of try and treat it, rather than try and find an explanation as to what it is.
Yeah, I really don't have a theory yet. It's basically, it's more the fear. Again, I don't know why, because I'm still here and I am healthy, but the fact is it's just a worry, because you don't know. You just don't know.
I was here in this room, in our bedroom, and it was 3:17 a.m., the early hours of the morning. I was here alone. My husband had gone away on a training course. I was sleeping on that side of the bed, and my young son was sleeping on this side. He was a lot smaller then. And I was woken up by... It was just a strange feeling, really. It was like unseen hands sort of shaking you awake. And I had this urge to get out of bed and go and look out the window. It was like someone was telling me to go and look out the window. Just very strange. I did. I got out of the bed and I walked over to those windows and looked out, and in the distance there were lots of little lights moving around. And I thought at first that they were just stars, moving around in the distance. I remember thinking, wow, they look pretty, and then realising that stars don't do that. I felt myself sort of being lifted up, being pulled upwards. And I was in this light, lots of blue-white light. And then the light dimmed down and I could see sort of shadows moving around in this light. And then the light sort of dimmed down a bit more, and then there standing in front of me were what I would describe as 3 non-human beings. They're about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, brown, tan in colour, and had large oval heads, large oval black eyes, had long skinny arms. They looked like undeveloped children. They moved up and stood in front of me, and one of them stood directly ahead and one on either side. And they had a funny smell to them. I think the most traumatic part really was this taller one had come and stood by my head, and he wasn't holding me, but I felt like he was holding me down. He was leaning across the head of this table and staring into my face. And I couldn't move. It was like all I could do was respond to him looking at me. And one of the other little brown guys came over from the right, and he was holding something that looked like a single strand of fibre optic cable, and it was lit up all along its length. It didn't have a light on it or anything. It was just a light. And the one standing at the head of the table took my head and sort of turned it slightly facing that way. And then I just felt this most tremendous pain, like my head was being sort of split open on the inside. It was just a tremendous pain. And I knew that whatever this was, that this one was carrying, that they'd stuck it into my head. And I felt a sharp pull at the back of my head, like a tug, a sudden tug. And I was laying on, as I say, laying on this table, and I can remember I'm crying, and the tears are running down my nose and sort of dropping onto my lip, and I can taste them. I can taste the salty tears, you know, and it's not the sort of thing, those aren't the things that happen in dreams. Those are the things that happen for real. I have experienced vivid dreams like, you know, everyone else, and they remain with you for a while. In fact, they're extremely vivid. But I have never, ever woken up from such a dream or a nightmare with hair missing from the back of my head, a small hole in my navel that was leaking fluid, all the bruises where this, you know, pencil thing had touched me, and this overwhelming sort of memory of smells and sounds. You know, these are real, as I say, sort of this is real sensory input here, and you just don't get that in dreams. You know, this was real. Whatever level of reality it was definitely real.